computer and my address, actually gave me my address in Dearborn. And I said, no, I'm not, which is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And make a long story short, he said, can you turn on your computer? I said, well, I'll have to turn it on. So I said, I'm turning it on, I got a speakerphone next to it. I want to keep him on the line as long as I can, just out of revenge. And he said, can you have your desktop? I said, no, it takes 15 to 20 minutes for me to power up my computer. And then he says, 20 minutes, how long has that been going on? In this thick accent. I said, oh, a couple of years. So he says, well, I'll wait. I said, fine, you wait. So I started reading the book and everything, and I got back on. I said, I feel bad that you're waiting. Why don't you call me back? I'm not going to ask him for his phone number. And he says, well, I'm busy, but if you want my phone number, you can take it, So he gave me an odd area code. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I said, okay, I'll call you back in 15, 20 minutes once I get online. And then he said, thank you. Well, then I called Microsoft. I have their tech number from a couple of years ago. They picked up right away. I didn't have to wait. I said, well, first of all, this gentleman said he's a contract worker for Microsoft.
Right.
And that they're helping them out because my computer is sending false messages to their servers in certain areas of the United States and screwing them up, and they want to help clear up the server problem coming from my computer.
Oh, nice.
So then this real nice guy from Microsoft, really articulate, said, that's bogus. Nobody is ever going to contact you that says they're working for Microsoft unless it's Microsoft and they give you this number that you call me on, because we have certain numbers for random calls. We got numbers for people that subscribe to our text service, and we got retailers that come. So just ignore it. Well, he never called back, and I never called that number back. But that's PayPal, same thing like you said, they clipped the logo and said my account's in error or something, but when I look at the email they want to reply me to, it's usually got a .uk or Soviet Union type of description after the PayPal logo goes.
Yes.
And
.ru is Russia. So
yeah, something like that, But I was going to ask you some specific things.
Sure.
Why don't you think that when you create a password on a computer, that part of the requirement when you create that password is to type in the URL of your computer? That's a number that's very seldom used by people like me. The URL seems to be a key address. So once you register to a website like AOL or to whatever, Target, online, they demand that you put this computer that you got, it's unique to that computer, that number. So whoever does ever get my password for Target, they would also have to have access to know that URL number in order to hack into that account of mine.
I'm going to guess you're talking about the IP address.
IP address, okay. Because I have a different one for each computer. I have 3 computers.
Yeah.
They're not the same.
Yeah. It's the dotted quad, 177 dot
Yeah.
204 dot, yeah.
Make that an industry standard. It's just another fence that they'd have to circumnavigate.
First of all, it's not constant. Generally speaking, your ISP can give you a different IP address from one time to another. In a lot of cases, the IP address is a non-routable, for internal use only IP address. But I think the biggest issue I would see is you are actually using information that you probably don't want to be putting out on the internet willy-nilly that is identified to you. I mean, if you're going to put a number onto something, a random number.
Not just that, but your internet traffic, even if you connect through a VPN or whatnot, they have a way of pulling
not necessarily the information out of the packets that are traveling. They can pull the header information. They have all that information already. Okay, and like he was saying, the non-routable addresses, if you set up a wireless router within your home or even a wired router, you can have as many machines hooked up to that, up to like 254 machines. The way that the router works, you get one outside world IP address from your internet service provider. And on the inside, you can assign up to 254 addresses to any machines within your network. When your inside network leaves and goes to the outside world, every single computer on the inside looks like that one IP address because of network address translation. So at that point in time, if you have internal machines doing specific tasks, identifying things by an IP address, unless you are able to pull logs out of your router, you're never going to truly know who went where.
I guess you could use a MAC address, but you wouldn't want to be giving that to everyone.
No, because at that point in time, you're inviting MAC address spoofing and anything else, and then at that point in time, with wireless routers, you have the ability to lock it down in multiple ways. You can have your encryption passphrase that if you don't know my passphrase, you can't get on my network. You can turn off your SSID broadcast so that unless you know the name of the network and then you know the passphrase, you won't be able to get on. You can also lock it down a third way, saying if you are not within this list of MAC addresses, I don't care what else you know, you're not getting on my network. And at that point in time, if you're broadcasting a MAC address, you're opening yourself up to other issues. And because we've been, at my place of work, we've been tasked with installing some kind of a password manager solution, not for a single user, but for specific groups. So we've been looking at different solutions, like Password Manager Pro. Open source wise, we've been looking at Radic. So at that point in time, there was a big question, okay, we're going to install this on a server. Do we want to encrypt the database or do we not want to encrypt it? Well, once you encrypt a drive, the only real way you're going to get benefit out of that encryption is if the drive is powered off. Because if you encrypt an entire server, when you boot that server on, you type in your encryption key so that the drive can be decrypted and the system can run normally. Encryption is great on a laptop hard drive because it is possible that somebody can steal it from you, you could lose it, things of that nature. How often do you power off a server and transport it? Or how often does somebody that doesn't isn't allowed access into your server room, how often do people break in and steal things? Not that it never happens, but that's like winning the lottery of bad luck. So, I mean, at that point in time, you look for things that, do they store your password values in the database and in a hashed value, something that's not going to be plain text. If you do decide to go to the route where it's not stored encrypted, who has access to that database? What users, because we're going to be running it on a MySQL database. So at that point in time, what MySQL users have access to that database and what functions can they perform? And then who within the teams of administrators or anything else, who has the passwords so that when you log into MySQL, what functions do they play? So there's no one
It's out of control.
Yeah, there's no one end-all be-all solution. It's just a matter of providing as many hurdles as possible.
Yeah. There are best practices, and most of the problems places get into are because they didn't do something that they should have done that was well known. And, you know, there's a couple of places that I like to go to. One of them is the Sands Institute, and I know they have published, you know, here are all the things you should be doing if you're involved in security in a company. Sophos Security is another place I really like, and they have what they call the 7 deadly sins, you know, the most common ways that companies mess that up. So if you at least get those things taken care of, you're much less likely to get into trouble.
It almost seems like you need the government to step in and create some kind of body that audits top Fortune 500 companies.
I think that's gonna be hard to do because most generally the crimes are committed globally.
Yeah.
Well, so there are things that that are required. You get to a large enough company, they're going to have their policies and they're going to have
Yes,
enforcement
any company
rules,
that deals with
things like
credit
that.
card numbers, you have your PCI compliance.
Right.
You know, your healthcare industries have HIPAA.
Yeah.
But there's no all-encompassing blanketed. And if the United States comes up with things, with these regulations and whatnot, how do you make the rest of the world enforce them?
Coming here, knowing I'm coming here, I did something, and just glance at it, you were talking, because the only really thing that I got out of this class, and I'm retired, you know, I'm not into computers. I use my computers for a lot of things, banking, stock brokerage, trading, so forth.
Then you have assets to protect.
Yeah, so I thought, you're talking about protection, and the 2 things I got out of the class so far, I might think of another one, but I took some notes, was one, the number of characters to make up a password. I think the most I have is 8. That's it. The second thing was the last pass, I never knew about that.
Yeah.
Now, I went to a certain location when I knew I was coming here to show you what I go through. See this?
Okay.
This is an Excel document.
Oh, one of those.
Every one of these lines is a website that I go to. Some of it
Right.
is not so secure, neat, but a lot of it is. So I have my password and my user ID and my email. And I keep this in my safe deposit box at Coal America Bank.
Okay.
All right, now, of course, it's cumbersome because sometimes I'm going at a coffee shop and I want to go to not a high secure site, but I have a unique password for these sites. Everyone's unique. So my question now to you is, should I make it a policy to change my password for every one of these lines, which are different, once a month? What good does it do if I did? I mean, it would take me an hour and a half.
I don't see that that's, you know, one of the things that a lot of places do is and this is one of those corporate things, you know, you must change your password every 60, 90, whatever.
30 days, and you
30
can't
days.
use the last 10 that you've created.
Right, and, you know, Steve Gibson tells a story about a guy who worked in a place like that, and it was like, yeah, you can't use any of the last 8, so he just changed his password 9 times in a row to get back to the one he liked.
Well,
Yeah.
right, so there's advantages and disadvantages, and, you get to a big company that has policies and procedures and stuff, the point really is that you have to, describe what you're doing, and have that reviewed, and, reasonable people will look at, what your practice is and decide, does that fit with our policy or not? And then you have to explain what you're doing, that type of thing. So you get to the point where you have, peers who review what you're doing and you understand what the policies are and stuff. So is it every 90 days you're changing your password, or is it once a year? Well, if it's a really critical type of thing, maybe you change it more often. If it's more likely you're going to cause problems by changing the password, then you're going to actually prevent from making changes. All these little things should be
Right.
based on the real needs and stuff. And critical
But-
thing is to have it reviewed.
The thing that I have always argued about with that is, have you taken psychology into account? Because, I was just reading the other day a story about pen testing, the company brought in a security outfit, and this guy from the security company just was walking around with a cell phone, with a camera, just taking pictures, and walked through the entire place doing that, and only one person in the entire company said, "What the hell are you doing?" All right?
With a camera or like a phone?
Phone camera.
And if you hear the clicking,
Yeah.
you question anybody like that, because
No.
at that point in time.
Nobody, but only one person in the entire place even said anything like, "What are you doing?" Now, if you tell people you must change your password, and
Did that sound like a camera?
not really,
Yeah.
Did to me, because I have a Samsung phone.
and let's say, you know, you've put in a couple of other things. It has to be at least so many characters, and, you know, this is the character set you have to, you know, must have at least one number, and that kind of stuff. What will people do?
Write it down.
Write them down.
Sticky note on their monitor.
Sticky note on the
Exactly.
monitor,
That's-
so the guy walking around with the camera is gonna get it, and so, you know, it's like, okay, what is the real net effect on security from forcing people to change their I've always argued you would get much better security if you insisted everyone have a really good password, memorize it, and stick with it.
Yes.
The only thing I thought of is when we're talking about groups capturing your packet data and then later deciphering it. In that case, it would be good to have a new password. By the time they were able to crack your password, 90 days have passed, your password's different.
But it also, that's a good point, but more often than not, and most security officers and security departments don't look at it this way. Stop fighting human nature. When I worked for HP, it was mandatory that all employees took little online security courses. Here's rules for good, strong passwords. Do's and don'ts with your company-issued cell phone, do's and don'ts with your company-issued laptop. If you take into account human nature and you teach people how to make strong, secure passwords, and maybe say, you know what, change it once a year. If you change it every 60 days, every 90 days, and then say you can't use the last 10 passwords that you've used, at that point in time, you're asking for the supply closet to be robbed of all the sticky notes. And it's exactly what's going to happen. And people, okay, well, I have my sticky note on the bottom of my laptop, so people can't get into it. You know, it's not visible, or on the bottom of my mouse pad, it's not visible.
Right. So I just wanted to mention, all of the presentations that I do are Creative Commons licensed, which basically have at it. So,
I didn't hear that.
Creative Commons is a licensing, and so the license that I use basically says, if you want to grab a copy, go ahead, but share it with other people the same way I shared it with you. And if you use it for any reason, just mention my name. You know, hey, I got this from Kevin O'Brien. And that's really all I ask, those two things, you know. Give you a little bit of credit, and so that's what's called an attribution share-alike license in Creative Commons. Now, I've got a bunch of different presentations available on my site. They're all also up on SlideShare. But this one, if you wanted to come back and review it, it's freely available. So.
And the videos I'll be putting on YouTube.
Yeah.
Check out, get onto our mailing list, the MD Lug Club that sort of is helping to sponsor this, mdlug.org. If you, yes, UG. So Metro Detroit Linux User Group.org. And so we have a mailing list, and the mailing list, you know, is pretty active on technical computer stuff. So, you know, some people might say it's a little bit more technical than the general public type of stuff. But the point is that at some point I'll post this, you know, video out on that list.
On YouTube?
I put it out on YouTube and then I
Mhm.
post it to the email list.
You could probably search for
Yep.
MD Lug or something
Yep.
on YouTube.
So if I go to LastPass, is it easy for me to create the account and
Oh, yeah.
load all my other lines from
It's-
that Excel document in?
Here's the way you do it, okay? First, you install the extension into your browser. So what browser do you like to use?
Internet Explorer or Chrome?
Okay. And I do not have Internet Explorer on this computer because it's a Linux computer. I do have Chrome. But with Chrome, you know, you go to what's called the hamburger menu, the 3 lines, and click that, and then go into the settings, and I think it's called extensions or something like.
Yeah, or you can go to lastpass.com and they'll recognize what browser you're using, and
Okay.
it'll have the install button for the browser that you're using.
All right.
And LastPass is free to use on a laptop or a desktop. If you want to use it on your mobile phone, on a smartphone, then it's $12 a year, right now.
If I got 3 laptops, do I have to go 3 times to LastPass to register those laptops?
No, so the first time when you install it, it'll ask you to create an account, and then on the other computers, you'll just go to lastpass.com just to download the installer, and then once you've got it installed, you can use the same account that you created the first time.
Okay, so if I understand it, Kevin, if I do this successfully on LastPass,
Yeah.
in the future, every time I go to a website that asks me for a password,
LastPass will, you're putting in a password. LastPass will see that this has come up, and it'll pop up at that point and say, hey, you know, what's going on? Is this something I should be helping you with?
so my AOL's password I would put in, or the same password on all my sites?
Yeah, well, if you've already got the password, you just
Yeah.
type it in, and then LastPass will say, do you want me to remember this?
Oh, okay, all right.
So in this version of Chrome, it's in the hamburger menu, more tools, and
I've
then
never heard of
extensions.
hamburger menu.
And it's because it's the 3 horizontal lines, so it's like the hamburger between the 2 pieces of bun.
It's like the only button on
It's
the
under
right side.
tools?
More tools,
Okay, more tools.
and then more tools lead you to extensions. So what I do is I install the extension, and then say, I open the extension up, and at that point it says, if it's the first time, it'll tell me I need to create an account. If it's on another computer, I can just say, no, I've already got an account, thank you, here's my account, please connect them. And yeah, the free version is fine for computers. For $12 a year, I like having it available on my phone.
So I didn't know it was gonna cost me to have it on my phone. I didn't pay anything, and so I must be on like the 3-month free trial thing or something?
I don't know, I just,
So at some point it's gonna lock me out?
you know,
Delete your account.
Well, I keep getting the nagware from another
Yeah.
password management software, and I just, you know, say no, and it lets me continue. What they want to do is have you pay so you can back it up, right?
Oh, you use Keeper. 'Cause that's what I use on my phone, and it's always like,
Yep.
you're not protected.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You know, and it's like, you know, so
Well-
if I lose my phone, I lose my stuff. And it's just like,
part of the reason, you know, first of all, I can afford $12 a year. It's not that big a deal.
It's nice to support them, to
And,
know that it's still going to be around.
You know, yeah, exactly. Stuff that I rely on, I want to be there. It's the same reason I donate to a number of open source projects. It's like, okay, I use this stuff. It's got to be supported. You know, there was an interesting situation, just really came out in the last couple of months about the GPG encryption software. That it was this one guy in Germany that had written it and was supporting it, and he was going broke. And it's like, well, we all use that. And finally, that got picked up in, I think it was an article in ProPublica or something that went viral. And all of a sudden people realized, wait a minute, this guy is about to, he was all set to say, well, screw it, I'm getting out of it, right around the time Edward Snowden released the stuff and was using GPG. And he thought, oh, okay, I can't quit now. But fortunately, a bunch of people stepped up, and he's now funded, but that's, developers got to eat.
Yeah.
They got families.
Yeah.
I think I got one last question,
Sure.
with me though. When I worked at Chrysler in engineering, he gave me a corporate laptop. He also gave me a little stick called a BPM stick.
Mm-hmm.
When I traveled internationally or anywhere, if I
Yeah.
wanted to access the corporate network
Right.
from my company laptop,
Sure.
I would have to put the VPN thing into the USB port.
Exactly, yeah.
And so why isn't that used universally by everybody?
Well, let me jump
Costs
in.
money.
Let me jump in with a quick story on that. There was a company that was providing services like that, and large company had this whole thing where everybody had these little fobs and stuff, and the company that provided that service got hacked. So it's like,
Yeah.
oops.
So that through that?
Yeah, RSA is a famous one.
But the concept was.
Virtual, yes, it's what's called a
Virtual.
virtual private network,
Right,
VPN.
Right.
And what that does is it creates an encrypted connection between 2 points so that all the data that travels over it is secure. I think they're wonderful. I have one. Okay, you can buy one inexpensively, which is what I did, and for most people is probably the best way to do it. I think earlier you said something about sitting in a coffee shop. I would
Yeah.
not want to be like talking to my broker online in a coffee shop.
I don't talk to them, but I do look at,
Yeah, but do you log in?
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm telling you, it is trivial, and I know how to do it, to sit in that coffee shop with a piece of equipment that would let me look at all of your traffic and get your login and your password and all of that, because it's unsecured.
Yeah, so there's a whole thing about, how are you connecting, right? So if you're using Wi-Fi that has a connection that is encrypted, that's better than one that is not encrypted. And there's different ways of connecting. And some of the older equipment had a default, was it WPA? Was that what it was called? That was,
WEP.
that's since been, found to be not very good. And,
Right.
so everybody has moved up to a newer, higher level of encryption.
Today I use WPA2. That's
WPA2,
yeah, that's for my home Wi-Fi router.
Yeah.
That is secured with a
I
password.
have that,
And yeah, the two things that, there are several good things. One is to have a good password to secure it. Another one is to change the name. It's what's called an SSID.
yeah.
And all of the browsers ship with a default one. You should change it. Most routers come with an admin account that you can log in to make changes. Change the name of the admin account, change the password of the admin account, because all of these are default standards, and the bad guys know that. So they get on the internet and they go looking for, oh, here's another one that says Linksys. I wonder if they bothered to change anything else.
Or you go into
I can tell you how many
this.
times I've done that just from this.
Sure.
And at that point in time, I can go into your network settings and I can shut off your network. I can dictate the times you are allowed to use your network.
Go to bed.
Well, so one of the things they do, they can go into a restaurant and start up a service, basically a Wi-Fi hotspot with a name that's common like Linksys, and anybody coming in will, if their device is set up to connect automatically to Linksys, they will connect to that device, and they could be what they call
Well,
man in the middle, and you see everything.
Even better, because what devices like your laptops, your tablets, your phones, or whatever, remember Wi-Fi networks they've connected to before. So what you may not realize is they're broadcasting most of the time saying, hey, is this network around? So I can sit there in a coffee shop with Yassiger, and with that nice little piece of software and a nifty little bit of equipment, I can basically respond to that and say, why, yes, I happen to be that very network. I'd be happy to help you.
How far range does that little device go? Can they sit in a parking lot in a car and pick
You
up?
can. It
Yeah, I
depends.
think
A lot
so.
of